Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for When the Bough Breaks, which is episode 16 of season 1 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the episode When the Bough Breaks. So When the Bough Breaks is the episode where the Enterprise discovered this mythical forbidden planet that was apparently under cloak for like centuries and millennia, and they decloak in front of them and make first contact. And at first they're a bit weird about what they want, and then it's finally revealed that they are infertile and their species is dying out. So in order to fix this, they want to steal the Enterprise's children, in which they do. They beam them from the Enterprise and kidnap them and steal them immediately, and then use their superior technology to prevent the Picard and the crew from getting the children back. In fact, they want to ease their conscience and give the Enterprise something in return, which is the only reason why they don't disappear entirely. But they're convinced that the children stay, and there's nothing Picard can do about it. And so while Picard pretends to negotiate with Radu for compensation, they're really coming up with plans to try to rescue the children, which eventually come to fruition when they learn that the ozone layer of the planet is depleted, and that the computer and their technology that they're dependent on is failing, and that's what's causing the people that live there to be infertile. Is just one sign of a disease that's killing them, and if the children had stayed there, they would eventually get the same disease as well and also become infertile and die. And so Picard has to rescue children by force, but then makes it clear to Radu that this is what's happening, and they agree to help them reform the technology and save the planet. However, it does mean that they're not going to be able to use their cloak anymore. So, let's start with the mythical planet of Aldea. So it's they make the comparison to Atlantis, and that this is like legends, and the episode starts with Riker saying, "Oh, there's this legendary planet, it's just a myth, it doesn't really exist," and then it appears in front of them. I do wonder if this was really necessary. It doesn't really seem to have any effect on the rest of the plot or the story whatsoever, mainly because we've never been told about this before. So we're introduced the concept of this Atlantis myth at the start of the episode, and then 2 minutes later we're shown it's not a myth. So that kind of deflates the whole purpose of it, because for the majority of this episode we are aware that this isn't like a myth or a legend or whatever, that is an actual planet with actual people. We do understand that why it was interpreted as the myth is because they had this superior technology that many people didn't understand, and so it created this myth, and plus it was, a whole planet that was cloaked. But yeah, I really have no attachment to this being an Atlantis analogy. It doesn't, and nothing in the way these people behave or how they act makes them seem like mythical. They just seem like normal douchebags to me. So that part of it didn't seem to work for me. But the part of them with abducting children, I think it's interesting. Like, the character for I always want to say ragu. It reminds me of pasta sauce or something. But anyway, he by the way, is played by the actor who played Deep Throat on the X-Files. Every time I see that, that's all I could see. Apparently, this is also the same guy who played Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain in Time's Arrow. Oh yes, that's right. Now I remember. Like that was such an over the top performance, and he was in way more makeup in that. So I don't really connect him to that as much, even though I know intellectually it's the same actor. But whenever I see him, I see Deep Throat from X-Files. But anyway, regardless of all that, he was a believable character, but someone who was I want to say an asshole or a dickhead, but he was more of closed-minded. He was more of, I don't know, I was trying to find the right word for him, because Ricardo's right, that he is just trying to ease his conscience and pretend like he's in the right and there's nothing wrong with what he's doing. But they seem to imply, like, he seems the whole concept of, why are you so worried about your children? You could just have more. He thinks the whole concept of the attachment that the Enterprise crew has for its children is absurd, and he doesn't understand it. However, we later see that, I believe the young lady is his daughter, but whoever the young lady is becomes attached to one of the young children. It's like, no, I'm not giving her up. So it feels like the Aldeans also have attachment towards children. So his being obtuse over not understanding why Picard and all are so pissed off, and why they're not just going to accept gifts for children in exchange, is kind of I just don't buy it. It kind of doesn't. It's kind of absurd, and it does seem to be there for plot contrivance, because there needs to be conflict. Because it doesn't really, to me, it doesn't. They are being obtuse and absurd by just abducting the children instead of taking the Enterprise's offer to actually help them with their infertility problem. And they're like, no, we'll just steal some children, and they will become our future. But they don't seem to care that these children who continue the traditions of Aldea and become, carry on the population of Aldea. And by the way, the population of Aldea is apparently 20 people. But let's not get into that. That's a problem inherent with Star Trek and Nixon, mainly because of budget issues. But anyway, so regardless of that, they would have no biological connection to their descendants. But maybe they don't care, to be fair. Maybe that's not a thing for them. But I don't know, it just seemed weird to me that they would go straight to that instead of, hey, why can you help us actually? So now they're acting like, oh, we have a superior technologies, there's nothing you puny federations can do. But then they make it clear that they have no basic understanding of how their technology works. They just use it. And so it seems like they should be open to people who would actually understand how their technology works, and maybe they could come up with something they haven't thought of. Just a thought, since they're so like hyper dependent on the custodian for everything, and they're not able to do anything themselves. I don't know. They're being so stubborn and obtuse, and just, hey, let's just kidnap these kids. And why are you so upset about it? It just seems plot contrivancy a little bit for me, so that there can be a conflict. But then, like, so the thing with Wesley, like, I've heard some people talk about this episode, like, complaining about Wesley and how annoying he is. However, I would actually say this is one of the better Wesley episodes to me. I actually didn't find him the least bit annoying in this episode, and I think this was actually good use of Wesley, particularly when compared to the rest of the season, because Wesley is just portrayed as another kid, and he doesn't like save the ship, or he isn't like super ingenious or anything. He's shown as the leader of the kids, but that's because he's the oldest, so that makes sense. He's abducted along with the other kids. And he has to deal with the other kids and try to comfort them and get them to do a hunger strike. And then, like, when his mother comes down and tries to hint at him to, like, scan the other person, like, that's That's pretty straightforward. Does not have to be a super genius. He's not creating tractor beams, or is the only one who could tell that the obvious data imposter is obvious, or saving the ship. The only one who's able to save the ship for other disaster. Only one to figure it out that Picard's being mind controlled by the Ferengi, and other shit like this. I could go on and on and on. Where that just drives me insane with how they portray Wesley as such a Mary Sue and just super genius. And here, he's just a kid. And he's just doing the best he can in a bad situation. And that's what this character should fucking be used for. I'm sorry. And so, I actually like his use here in this episode. But I do think the episode does drag a bit, like with, the people down there, like teaching the kids how to do art or music or whatnot. The one thing I did like, however, was the young girl who was like, the guy was teaching her how to play music by like using her thoughts. I wish I could do that. But anyway, and she kept playing something sad. He's like, oh, this time play something happy. And she's just like, well, that's not how I feel. I thought that was actually beautiful because that does explain just how these people don't seem to comprehend the emotional damage that they're doing to the kids from taking them away, and they're slowly starting to get it. Like, even that one hairy dude who like had a big fight over his dad for making him do calculus, he seemed all cool and really smart with doing the sculpturing and like doing it, but then when he started reminiscing about, vacations he took with his family, he started to realize how much he missed them, and the people who were caring for him could see this. And so I liked that. But again, it was unfortunate that they weren't the ones that went to Radu, whatever his name is, Deep Throat. They're not the ones who went to him and be like, maybe this is wrong. Maybe we shouldn't do it this way. Maybe we should negotiate with Picard. But instead it had to be Picard like finding a technobabble excuse where they found the hole in the shield where Riker and Data could beam in and just shut their shit down. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually thought that was kind of cool how Riker did that, because it was kind of rewarding after a whole episode where Picard was being outmaneuvered with this, race with superior technology. He was being very obtuse and very stubborn and acting like, I have all the power here and you can either listen to me or I'm going to throw you halfway across the galaxy. And it was this smug. That's the word I'm looking for. These assholes are smug. So it was very rewarding. It was very refreshing to see Picard get the better of those smug assholes, especially when Radu tried to use his super technology to just make Picard go away, and it does nothing. He's just tapping and just going, and then Picard, very smug, is like, Commander Riker, were you successful in disabling their technology? And I was like, oh, fuck you, Radu! So that was rewarding, for sure, but on a more character basis, it would have been more interesting if those other adults there went to Radu and said, hey, this is wrong. Even in this moment, they did have the young lady who may or may not be his daughter. She did at one point say, like, yeah, we should listen to them. But she was not, like, she was like comforting Alexandra, the youngest girl there who missed her mother and stuff, so she kind of understood it. But I think it would have been more powerful if it came from like the sculptor dudes or the musical dude, or maybe they could have at least backed her up. And they should have pressured Radu even when he was being stubborn and ignorant. And then when he went to do his power, nothing happened. And then they went to him and like, look, we need to listen to them. I think that would have been better. That would have been more of a emotional payoff. Um. So I didn't think this episode was terrible, and I did like the music. I've been very vocal about how I prefer Dennis McCarthy's music to Ron Jones, particularly in season 1. Well, both their music in season 1 I think is a bit on the cheesy side. I think it gets better in later seasons, but I do like his music here. And it's interesting that when they tell the young girl to play a song, she basically just plays a theme that they've used before. In fact, they used it for The Traveler back in Where No One's Gone Before. But anyway, so the music is cool, yeah. And it's, I don't know, I think it drags on, as I said, it drags on too long, and it's a bit frustrating at points, but the ending is sort of rewarding that pays off. But so I don't hate this episode. I don't think it's one of the worst things ever. A lot of people tend to hate Star Trek episodes that have kids, but I thought this was maybe slightly contrived with the conflict, with how obtuse that Radu was being, but it was, again, there were some emotional beats that worked for me, and there was some tension that worked. It maybe dragged on a bit longer than it should have, but ultimately, like, it's kind of another one of those forgettable episodes. That's really, I only visit because I do rewatch the entire show. It's not an episode that I think about very much, or that I would ever want to watch again intentionally. Anyway, so now's the time for me to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. Very much appreciate it. It does really help the channel out a lot, helps me out a lot. I'm just so thankful and humbled by all the support I get from the following people: Francisco Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Money Jester, Joel Lavalles, Alessandro Megalacio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neal House. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we do have a couple of Patreon comments for this episode. First comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, I wrote a long comment on my phone, but sigh, it disappeared. In short, while I have no problem with families on the ship, the children do not act like children. Clearly, this episode is the Roddenberry box in action, as if children hardly seem traumatized for being kidnapped. 4 hunger and calculus strikes out of 10. That is a shame that your comment got lost. That's really frustrating. That really sucks when you put a lot of effort into writing something and just technology fails you. So yeah, that does suck. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells that says, when the bow breaks. Oh look, it's another mythical hidden planet. This planet is compared to Atlantis, which seems unfortunate to me because all the legends say that Atlantis and all of its inhabitants were destroyed by angry sea gods. This planet is named Aldea. The inhabitants are sterile, and they've forgotten the knowledge of their ancestors, so they rely on their computer to manage their lives. Does this sound like a TOS episode to you? The Aldeans kidnap a group of children from the Enterprise, presumably only the best and brightest, to carry on their civilization, then seem honestly puzzled when the Enterprise crew won't accept gifts of knowledge in exchange. Any other show would have had the kids running around and shouting, or even making flying daggers appear in front of the helmsmen of the ship. But because we can't have conflict in TNG yet, Wesley leads the kids in a hunger strike and a sit-in. I'm sorry, this is not how little kids behave. The resolution of the planet shields being the problem was underwhelming, and the message about the ozone layer was excessively preachy. 7 kids are too small an amount to restart a gene pool. Excellent point. And who learns calculus at age 10? I'm not sure which is worse. 1, the child Alexandra gluing her triple plushie to the back of Picard's uniform amidst a wave of fake laughter. Or 2, Troy saying, "And we know they'll make good parents," about the Aldeans. 2 of Will Wheaton's siblings appearing uncredited out of 10. Now, the one thing I will kind of have to disagree with is that the children are not really acting or behaving like children. I guess I never saw it that way. I mean, I suppose, like, now that you bring it up, that maybe they should be throwing tantrums more and stuff like that. But, you know, some children are a bit more well-behaved. And yes, I do see a bit of the Roddenberry box that children of the 25th century or 21st century are perfect kind of thing portraying here. But they do act a bit childlike and a bit naive. And I do see them not, like, fully understanding the situation they're in, except for Wesley. And then they slowly start to realize they missed their parents like that. I thought the little girl being sad was a nice touch. I thought Alexandra from being like, "I miss my mommy." I think that's how a kid would behave. But I don't know. I don't think they're, wrong for suggesting that. I just never personally saw it that way. And yes, but Brendan brings up a really good point about this being like a TOS episode. That is something I did want to talk about, how I really felt this episode felt very strongly like an original series episode. Now, some season 1 episodes do, and this is something I didn't realize before, but of course a lot of the same writers and producers from the original series were on season 1, more so than later seasons. But this episode in particular, the fact that it has a civilization who's dependent on the supercomputer and who's forgotten how to use the supercomputer and who are being obtuse, that does seem like a plot the original series would do. They love their fucking civilizations that were dependent on supercomputers. Now, this one wasn't controlling them, but still, it's like they've forgotten how to use it. It kind of reminds me a bit of For the World is Hollow, where they, forgotten everything about their past and history and about how they use it. And they're like, why would we want to repair it or whatever? So, yeah, that aspect of it felt very original series-esque to me. And, by the way, Aldea, when the name they decided for the planet, I feel like it kind of sounds like they're saying out there. That's how I always thought of it. Oh, out there. I don't know if that's right. But that's kind of what came to my mind. Yeah. Oh, the thing about the calculus. So I always took that as them trying to say that in the future there's sort of be more advanced education wise than we are now, because if you look back to a couple hundred years in the past, compare the education style to that of today, what young kids learn seems incredibly advanced to what they were learning several centuries ago, where most people didn't even know how to read and write. And now that's seen as a very common thing that absolutely everybody knows. And so I think that's what the commentary they were trying to make with 24th century, that the kids there are going to be super advanced, and calculus is going to seem like, even as seems like advanced to us, is going to be like child's play to people in the 24th century. And I get that. I can get that on board with that. I'm not bothered by that being in the annoying Roddenberry box or him thinking the future's too perfect. That kind of makes a bit of sense, but on the other hand, this show does not keep up with this. To my knowledge, especially when they show Jake or other younger people in the future, they don't show them as being super advanced. Even Nog couldn't even read very well. Of course, that's sort of making fun of Ferengis or whatnot, but still, they weren't. I don't think Jake could do calculus when he was 12, but So I don't think they capped up with this. This is more, but season 1 in particular has I said, a bit more in that Roddenberry box. But I don't have an issue with that. So anyway, my rating for When the Bough Breaks out of 10 is going to be a 5. I'm average. I was torn between a 5 and a 6. Almost gave this episode a 6 because I don't think it's bad. Like, I thought it was somewhat interesting. I wasn't bored during it, but I went with a 5 ultimately instead of a 6 because I realized how forgettable this episode is and how, like, when I knew it was time for me to watch it, I was like, okay, I guess I gotta watch this. Felt like a chore. So whenever I have that feeling about rewatching an episode where it feels like a chore, then it's not that good of an episode. But after I did watch, I didn't feel like it wasn't that bad of an experience, but it still is mostly a forgettable episode. As I said, it has some nice moments, some nice music, some nice character beats, but the plot drags a bit. That whole Aldea mythical legend thing fell apart and did not work, and the plot was the fact that Radu was being so stubborn was very contrived. So yeah, I think I will give this a 5 rather than a 6. So that is it for my review of When the Bough Breaks. So coming up next on my channel, let's see here. So Wednesday will be my covering the newest episode of Ahsoka. Friday I'll be covering back with another TNG episode with Home Soil. And Monday I'm actually going to go back, skipping TNG for a week. I'm actually going to cover Better Call Saul. Do my season 6 episode by episode review of Better Call Saul, because if you recall, about a year ago, or over a year ago, I did my season by season review. I covered every season of Better Call Saul except for season 6 because it hadn't aired yet, and I said I would wait a year after season 6 aired to finally finish my coverage of my Better Call Saul season by season reviews. And guess what? It's been about a year since season 6 of Better Call Saul finished. So I'm going to finally do that. Cover every episode of season 6 of Better Call Saul. And then the following month we'll come back to do my top 25 favorite episodes of Better Call Saul. So, yeah, finally finished that. And actually, as a Patreon supporter, Ricky reminded me about that because I kind of forgot. But I remembered at points, but then I forgot again. But anyway, yes, going to finish covering that. So, yeah, be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover The Next Generation. Also do many more videos on Star Trek and many other shows, Ahsoka, Better Call Saul, and whatnot. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.